10. We're back on the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast, another top 10. Michael joined me recently for his first top 10, and he done very, very well. Indeed, he has got a list with him. He's sent me the list, but for those of you on YouTube that can see, I'm not joined by Michael. I am joined by my resident problem child and my usual co-host, Mr. Dave Robinson. Hello, Dave.
Hello, mate. Yeah, I got FOMO. I've seen you doing these one-to-ones with Michael, and I was like, I need to dip back into this top 10 world.
Needs to get back into the top 10 malarkey. So today, we've done the US champions. You saw me and Justin do the top 10 WrestleManias ahead of WrestleMania. We're going back in time again. Now, those people that will know, the WWE had a championship called the Hardcore Championship. This was an Attitude Era championship, and it brought chaos to the world of wrestling. A 24/7 rule before the 24/7 championship was a thing. And Dave said to me, as he said, he had FOMO, he had a fear of missing out, and he said, "Why don't we do the top 10 hardcore champions, Dave?"
Yeah, but specifically the WWF hardcore
Yes,
title,
yes,
because
yes.
there were a few iterations. As you said, there was the 24/7 title. Then they brought the hardcore title back a couple of times, but it didn't
Yeah.
really gain any traction. You
Mm,
also had the WCW hardcore title for a while as well, which
did.
didn't. I don't think that moved over with the
No,
acquisition of WCW in 2001, I want to say.
no.
So yeah, just specifically the WWF hardcore title.
Yes, indeed. The WWF one it is. And as I said, we've got Michael's list as well. So I'll start with Michael's number 10. My number 10's slightly comedic value. I'll give my number 10, not giving it away. But Michael at number 10 on his list went for the charismatic enigma himself, Mr. Jeffrey Nero Hardy. At 10, he said he had some great feuds with Rob Van Dam in 2001 with two very highly rated hardcore title matches that summer. They clashed at Invasion and then they had the final ladder match at SummerSlam of that year, which stole the show. So his number 10, Dave, was Jeffrey Hardy.
Yeah, three reigns, combined days, 18 days as a hardcore champion. Obviously, it flip-flopped around more than any belt in history, other than perhaps the 24/7 title.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, great choice. Do you want my 10? What were we at it?
Let me do mine and then we'll have yours
Uh,
because I say mine's ridiculous. So
uh,
for
Mine
number
kind of
10,
ties in with Michael's, but yeah, you go ahead.
yeah, number 10 on mine. As I said, mine is a comedic wrestler. Not comedic. Well, no, no, no. Let me ring this wrong. He wasn't a comedic wrestler, but his reign as hardcore champion was a comedic one at that. It showed the belt's entertainment versatility. It also famous for its sort of street fight segments or street fight style segments with this particular one. And he just, like I said, he had a legendary comedic hardcore title run. And that one was the first ever Intercontinental champion, but had a very funny reign as a hardcore champion. And that was Mr. Pat Patterson, was my number 10.
Yeah, I remember him getting it. Jerry Briscoe had it as well, didn't he?
He did. He was in my honorable mentions, Briscoe. I couldn't tell. I couldn't really know between him or
Yeah.
Patterson, but I went with
He had,
Patterson.
he had one reign and it lasted 6 days. Pat
There you
Patterson.
go. Well,
Yeah.
longer than our reigns, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go on
Well,
then, Dave.
my 10, as I say, links into Michael's. So I didn't go with Jeff Hardy, but I went with a man that he was fighting for that title and the last ever WWF hardcore champion because it was unified with the IC title
Yes.
and
Was.
retired. Mine was Mr. Rob Van Dam,
There we
who
go.
he had four reigns, and
Yep.
in terms of how many combined days he was the champion for, oh, it's the only name I can't say on my list. 134 days as hardcore champion, combined days as hardcore
Across the
champion.
four reigns.
So yeah, quite impressive numbers. Mr. Rob Van Dam.
He's on my list, to be fair. He's just a bit tad higher up. So I will say that he is on my list without a doubt, Mr. Van Dam. I'll start with Michael's nine. He's number nine. He's Shane McMahon.
Mhm.
SummerSlam's 2000 saw Shane make his first and only title defense against Steve Blackman, which we all know is cemented from that massive fall
Yeah.
that Shane took. He actually said Shane fell higher Sorry, the match that saw Shane falling higher than the top of Hell in a Cell and then through the stage below, which he did when Blackman hit him with a stick. His head hit the stage and then he fell backwards off of the stage through. So yes, Michael is right. He fell higher than he did through Hell in a Cell, but probably a safer fall uh,
Yeah.
with the one at SummerSlam. But he put Shane at number 9 on his day. But have you got anything to add for Mr. Shane McMahon?
Yeah, I remember that fall. I mean, obviously, Shane, and throughout his career, has done some pretty big bumps, but I remember that like it was yesterday. It was probably kind of 25 years ago, something like that, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe even longer than that. But yeah, he had the one reign again, 6 days, same as Pat Patterson.
Yeah, it didn't last very long, did it, Mr. McMahon? It's or Shane McMahon. I
An
do
iconic
like.
moment. I think that's probably why Michael's gone for it. As I say, they were fighting over the title, and it was such an iconic that fall. I remember all the well, I was back at school back in the day. Like, did you see Shane? Did
Yeah,
you see what happened? Did you see what Blackman did to him? So
Shane was
yeah,
always that with that guy, though, isn't he? Do you remember the King of the Ring with Angle?
yeah,
And
through
it
the
missed the
screen.
first one. He didn't go through it the first time, and Shane was like, "Do it again." And it's like you could see Kurt like, "Fuck," when he missed the first one.
Yeah, yeah.
Shane was always synonymous with that. But I'll tell you what, Dave, do your 9 first, and then I'll have mine after.
So my number 10 was the last ever hardcore champion.
Yep.
My number 9 was the first ever hardcore champion, which was Mankind, Mick Foley. He
Yeah,
was awarded the title by Vince McMahon.
he
Um,
was.
it's a long time ago now, a very distant memory.
Uh-huh.
But as he was the first ever champion, and I remember I had a poster on my wall of, I mean, his reign himself. He had the one, he only had one reign and it lasted 28 days. But I
Mm.
think WWF magazine at the time, there was a poster that used to get in the middle, and
Yeah,
it was Mankind with the hardcore title. And it was kind of the design of the hardcore title was like the winged eagle that was all smashed up, and you
yeah,
had hardcore scrawled across it, and it was
yeah.
an absolute mess. I mean, it looked great. It was like an iconic belt. But yeah, I had a poster on my bedroom wall of Mankind with the hardcore title. So yeah, he's gone in at my number 9.
He's higher up mine. He is on there. He's definitely on there though.
Yeah.
My number 9. So I had a comedic 10 for a bit of fun. My number 9 was a guy. He was a hard-hitting brawler at the time, and his style suited the hardcore championship when he obviously did win it. He was a credible, what I would call tough guy present or tough guy champion. And obviously in the Attitude Era, we didn't see the best of him. He's better run come later on down the line in the WWE, but it's Bradshaw.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good shout.
I feel like, I've gone through a couple of like ones that, probably a little bit ones that some people haven't gone for or didn't choose, just
Yeah,
because I felt like trying to be a bit different. Obviously, I know that we always get some that are together. That's just nature of when we do these types of things. But I tried to go for a couple a little bit left field, and when I was
yeah,
searching through the championship list, and I saw Bradshaw, and I thought, you know what, he ain't gonna make a lot of lists that we ever do.
yeah,
Maybe he might make one. I was thinking of doing one that maybe like some of these ones that maybe these title reigns or maybe champions that haven't really been spoken about. Because I was thinking about his WWE championship reign when Cena beat him eventually, and how that under you sort of went under the radar really of how good that championship run actually was. And I saw Bradshaw as hardcore champion. I was like, he's got to be in my list somewhere.
Well, yeah, he had a good few reigns as well. 17 reigns, 50
17.
17. Yeah, I mean that's nothing compared to some of the other people. Interestingly enough, in terms of honorable mentions, Sean Stasiak, who was once known as Meat in the WWE, before he had a run in WCW, then he went back. He had 15 reigns, Sean Stasiak, which that kind of surprised me when I was looking at the numbers. But yeah, Bradshaw made my original 10, but I chopped him out. He didn't make my final 10, but he was in my first draft. So yeah, as you say, for some reason, synonymous with the hardcore title and a great pick, mate.
You need to get a clothesline from hell from taking him out of your. Have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try and bring him to Ignite one day, and he likes to do the circuit a little bit, doesn't he,
Top
Bradshaw?
10 clotheslines from hell. Heath
Oh,
Slater.
fuck.
Yeah,
Yeah, we might need to do that one day.
yeah.
Let's move on to number 8. So Michael's 8. This man racked up 21 reigns but was only 35 days in total. Most of the reigns were less than 1 day and happening during battle royals and house shows and whatnot. So he's put in, he's a Stevie Richards.
Yeah. So I don't recall. So I saw him on the list and I saw how many reigns that he'd had.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, I was kind of hoping that one of us would go with him. He hasn't made my
He
10.
hasn't, did he make mine? No, he didn't make mine either. No, no.
I can't remember too much of him. And I'm thinking, was it Stevie Richards? Was it Stephen Richards? Which period of this
Might have been
did he have the
Stephen.
title? Yeah, it
Might have
says
been
Stephen
Stephen.
in the list, but I don't recall him. I can't picture him holding the hardcore title. So
Because he done so many. As he said, 20 had 21 reigns over 35 days
yeah, there
combined.
must have been like some. Remember some of the reigns that were like momentary, and then they'd get rolled up. So we must
Well,
have
he's
had a
like
few.
saying, like, even house shows, he could have won it at the start, and by the intermission, he'd lost it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. I know that the hardcore title tour, some pay-per-views, it was in a featured match. I think Raven Kane Big Show at WrestleMania. That
Yeah.
match, yeah, but that match holds a special place for me. That's one I remember quite well. But I don't think Stephen Richards had gone into a pay-per-view in that period as hardcore champion with a defense. I think it was a lot of those like
Yeah.
mini reigns, and as you say, a lot of them may have taken place at house shows.
Yeah, definitely. So I like the fact that again, I like that our lists I mean, we're probably say we're probably going to have the same around, the 10, but the fact that we've had a lot of different names already and we're at 8, I know it sounds stupid. We're only lower down the list, but we've had so many different names
Yeah.
already, which is great. What was your 8, Dave?
My 8 is Tommy Dreamer,
Ooh.
14 reigns, 28 days. Again, probably fits into that category.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a hardcore legend, ECW alumni, the innovator of
Yep.
violence. And
Mm.
I just remember some quite specific spots
Mm.
during these hardcore matches and these hardcore chases and these backstage vignettes and bits and pieces
Yeah.
that they did. And yeah, when I think of Tommy Dreamer, I do picture him with the hardcore title. So again, he's one of those on my list that there's a few people that could have taken that spot, but I've gone for Tommy Dreamer.
My three honourable mentions, we've already mentioned him now. We had Gerald Briscoe, you mentioned him. You haven't put him on the list, but you mentioned him. We had
Yeah.
Shane McMahon, because he's obviously been used. And Tommy Dreamer was in my three honourable mentions. So we've used them all up now with
My
that.
my honourable mentions, and just because they were names that I just haven't thought of for so long, alongside Sean Stasiak, are what were they called? The Mean Street Posse. All three,
Pete Gas and
Pete
what was
Gas Rodney and Joey Abs, they all had, I believe, one reign, one for Joey Abs. Um, Pete Gas had two reigns, and Rodney had one reign. I'd forgot all about those guys until I started looking into this into
Do you
the
know
stuff.
what was so their theme was an underrated banger.
Yeah, yeah, I'd go with that.
Do you
Yeah,
know what though, Dave? I was thinking about this, right? As you do when you eat your cornflakes. I was thinking about like some really underrated themes. And I know that like maybe we'll do a top 10 on the underrated themes. Do you know what one of the most, or actually it was actually more underrated pops than anything else. And I remember, do you remember The Godfather?
yeah.
That theme, when that music hit, he
Oh,
always got a pop, man. The
that
Godfather.
first bit, I think it would still get the same pop now, mate. To be honest,
Yeah.
maybe even better.
Yeah.
Uh, what the thing is with underrated themes, you know they're underrated when you mention them, and straight away you can hear it in your head, and you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
I won't embarrass myself on
I know
YouTube
exactly
by
the bit
kind
that
of
you
humming
mean.
it along. But
Yeah.
so, Mean Street Posse and Godfather's theme, yeah, as soon as you
Yeah.
say it, I hear it,
I think we
So
need to do a
those are
top
good.
10 of
Yeah, yeah,
underrated themes. We do.
definitely.
Where are we up to? 8, right? So you've
I've
had
done eight.
yours.
Yeah, you're on
You've
your
done your
eighth.
one. Yeah, my one now. We've already been mentioned. It was your 10. Rob
Yeah, absolutely.
Van. He brought though what I thought about this because hardcore title. Listen, the hardcore title will never ever get 5-star matches or anything like that. But I think with Van Dam, what it did bring was that elevated quality of matches. Whereas a lot of the jokes, we had a lot of jokes in the hardcore, as we already mentioned. But it also, I think, put together a couple of bits that the hardcore title was synonymous for. We had the high level matches, but it also brought the pure chaos. And for somebody you mentioned like a Tommy Dreamer, Mr. ECW, ECW was all about the hardcore revolution. so RVD kind of had the top three kind of elements to the championship. That it kind
Yeah.
of the chaos, the elevated match quality, and the fact that he could go extreme and do the hardcore stuff if he needed to.
Absolutely. And like what I mentioned about some of those pay-per-view matches, like RVD had some of those pay-per-view matches with the hardcore title on the line or as part of them, like the unification match. The thing I love about the hardcore division or that period is yes, there are some jokes in there and there's
Yeah.
some very short reigns and stuff. But you've also got, and these people might feature on our list as we go, but you had like the Undertaker, Big Show, Booker T, Kurt Angle, RVD, as you mentioned, like top tier names in when you talk about the history of wrestling. So yeah, you have got a Joey Abs and a Pete Gas. Well, you got like a Johnny Stamboli, you
Yeah,
know.
Johnny the Bull Stamboli, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Terry Runnels had one title reign as well. Godfather's Ho had one reign. I don't know which one, but one of got. But then you've got the Undertaker and the Big Show, Christian. Some real big names in the world of wrestling.
Could you imagine if they etched the names of the winners of this and you had like Undertaker, Kane, a ho?
God, yeah. Imagine it like in like a cricket pavilion where they etch it onto the board when they get a test 100. Yeah, Godfather's Ho.
Godfather's ho.
She
Uh,
held the title for I think it was one of those quick reigns, and she got rolled up. It doesn't even say a day. She under a day was her reign, which is the lowest. There's 29 people who had a under a day reign.
but they should have split up by segments because he's probably won it in one segment of Raw and lost it in another,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Chris Jericho had one of those reigns as well. So Chris Jericho is on par with the Godfather's Ho in terms of combined days as hardcore champion.
The way that the Hall of Fame's going, the Godfather's ho will probably get in there at some point.
Yeah.
Probably get in there before some of the great wrestlers of this world, like Rick Martel and things
Yes.
like that. But at seven, right, Michael's seven. He's gone for Hardcore Holly as he's number seven. And obviously, there was a lot of this where he had his nephew Crash in there as well, which we all know, which we'll probably get to. He's probably very high up list. But this is said which where we saw a kind of change in the character. We had Bob Sparkplug Holly, the NASCAR driver. That's what he come in at. But it was there where we shifted the character towards hot, and we really saw that mean streak. I mean, do you remember when he took out all the Tough Enough kids? Matt Capaldi, or whatever his name is, he absolutely smashed him to bits during the Tough Enough session. And I think
Yes.
this is where we saw the big change of a character shift between Bob to Hardcore Holly.
Yeah, yeah. There's been some pictures of Hardcore Holly circulating online as well the past week or two. He's still in fantastic shape. He's
Yeah,
still
he is.
moving. Obviously, he looks a little bit older than the last time we saw him. Not somebody you hear much about, is he now, Hardcore Holly? You don't
No.
hear him on interviews or anything, so he's living a quiet life. But yeah, synonymous with the hardcore title and synonymous with the hardcore division in
Mm,
WF at the time.
yeah.
You say changing his name. I think that was a Vince Russo idea. I think it was during the Attitude Era. That was one of the things that Russo. That was one of his ideas to turn Bob Holly into Hardcore Holly.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's on my list. He's a bit higher up actually, but
Yeah.
great shape from Michael.
Yeah. And who's yours? Seven?
Seven for me is Rhino. So again,
Hey.
for some of the reasons I mentioned with Tommy Dreamer, but
Mhm.
when I think of the hardcore title as well, Rhino, obviously he's still active today. He's a huge man. He's a thick, wide man, and I just have this image of Rhino with this hardcore title. He could never put it round his waist. He wasn't big enough. Yeah, so there's just this image of this hardcore title against the backdrop of Rhino's frame, and we had some good gores and some great moments backstage and in the ring with Rhino. So yeah, again, one of those. It could have been multiple I could have gone with, but yeah, I think Rhino earns his spot. He had three reigns over 49 and 49 combined days, which was the same as Test. Test had 49 combined days as well. Not somebody that I automatically think of when I think of the hardcore title, but Rhino certainly is.
Certainly is. Yeah, he's a great pick. So on the aforementioned subject of big men. My seven was Kane.
Yeah.
And I think like I always thought that he was the powerhouse, but in many ways, obviously we had the WrestleMania thing on there, but he was obviously he lost the title if I remember rightly in some really weird and unusual ways. Kane lost the Hardcore Championship
He
when he
only had
handed it.
one reign, mate. Believe it or not, I thought he had multiple
No,
reigns.
it was only the one. It was only
Right.
the one. Yeah, yeah. But I'm sure
16
he lost it
days.
quite unusually. Something just springs to mind with Kane, but he also added at the time. And you mentioned we sort of mentioned that the Undertaker had a reign at the time as the Hardcore Champion, and at the Attitude Era, Kane was probably at his peak and at his best. And to have someone like Kane hold that title, even though it may not have been for too long, but he still had the reign, and it's star power to have Kane on there as well as a hardcore
Definitely.
champion.
Undertaker had one reign, but it was 58 days.
Yeah,
So a long reign. But yeah, Kane, again, he was in that hardcore match. And yeah, when I think of, yeah, I don't know about match quality, but certainly when I think of WrestleMania matches from years gone by, I think of that triple threat match for the hardcore
yeah.
title.
Such underrated. Again, maybe another one's underrated matches that we need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to look at because there's so many. I mean, you could you wouldn't be you wouldn't be amiss to put that on there as an
No.
underrated match that doesn't get the credit that it maybe deserves. In
Matches that just leave a mark in some way. Yes, they're not technically ma technical masterclasses, they're not
no,
Iron Man matches, but there's just something about them that the audience just really loved. And I certainly in that category for that match, and Kane was a big part of it.
yeah, definitely so. Right. So Michael Six is probably someone that's going to be on all of our lists at some point. Mick Foley. And
Mm.
he said the Foley gave the title the real credibility as the first champion. Had some fantastic matches. And he actually put on it as a side note that he loved the way that Mick would hold the title as if it was his precious.
Yeah, yeah, he kind of gripped onto it, didn't he? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
that.
that. Yeah. Yeah, as I say, he made my list. The only reason he's lower down on my list
Mm,
really is it was only the one reign, but he
yes.
was as Michael said, he was the first champion. He gave that belt instant credibility,
Mm,
and he really set not just the belt, but the whole division. Really, it was just so fitting that Mankind was the first champion.
yeah, he's up my list. He's quite high, a bit further up my list
Yeah.
than six. But my six, uh, the Big Boss Man was
Mhm.
in my six. He was a dominant early champion. I felt as if like he kind of put a bit of structure to it before it went really nuts. Like in there, and then again, we're talking about someone that kind of established that championship's identity, and I felt as if the Boss Man certainly did that during the early stages.
Absolutely. He's coming up next for me. He's my number five. But so we're kind of in the same thinking. He had the longest reign
Mm.
at like longest individual reign of
Yeah,
97 days. He had four title reigns and he held the belt for 154 combined days, which is the second he's second on the list for in terms of combined days. So yeah, he's number five. But my number six was probably someone that's going to be on all our lists as well, I imagine. Steve Blackman.
yeah,
Uh, Lethal Weapon had six reigns, which is it's not the amount of reigns that makes him top of the list, but 172 combined days makes him number one in terms of overall days as champion. We've already spoke about the Shane McMahon match, but there were lots of moments with Steve Blackman and his kendo sticks, or his he wasn't kendo sticks, was he? They weren't kendo. They
yeah.
were
He was again
small,
the stick. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
he had some smaller sticks as well. I think that he used to whiz
Oh,
about
nunchucks.
nunchuck type thing, was it? Or but
Yeah,
yeah, somebody a very serious character in a time where there were so many crazy characters and personalities in that era of wrestling and the Attitude Era. But I think Steve Blackman came in as a mixed martial artist into a hardcore title, and that blend just really worked. That violence, that
yeah. Mm.
seriousness. Let me just cut this call, mate. And just serious persona. Yeah, he made number six on mine.
He's a little bit higher up mine. Not too much higher, but a
Yeah.
little bit higher. So you mentioned your five was Boss Man.
Five was the big boss man, yeah.
Yeah.
Six on
So
yours.
yeah. So you've gone for that's your five. I'll do my five, and I'll do a double with Michael when I do his five and four. So my five,
Cool.
Al Snow. Was my five. I felt he was a key figure in the early stages of the hardcore division. But he added, like what I think Al Snow added a little bit here was he had a strong story because he's got a strong storytelling brain, and then with that comedic timing. And with those little, I know it's not necessarily been the hardcore, but it was like, what does everybody want? Head. That's like something really ridiculous that he had come up with that was so well done. But I think if you put all that together, and then of course frequent entertaining defenses on top of that, he kind of not solidified what the hardcore division was, but if you built a hardcore division around someone, Al Snow would be one of the people that you'd build it around.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's on my list as well. 6 rounds, 129 days. I thought that Head was the champion as well at some point. I'm obviously misremembering it. Or maybe he just had Head with the belt in the corner of the ring or something. But I had a feeling that Head was the actual champion, or he'd put Head on somebody to win a match.
Yeah.
So maybe that did happen and it wasn't for a hardcore title, or maybe it didn't happen. I'm just completely making it up. But yeah, I loved Al Snow's run at that period of time. I think when I think of when I first really, because I was, we spoke on this podcast, I was a WCW guy, and then I
Yes.
got into WWF, got into the Attitude Era, and he's one of those characters that I was drawn to straight away. I remember we went on a UK tour. It was the Attitude Adjustment Tour back in, I want to say 98 or 99. And my
Yeah.
brother, Mark, he had Al Snow's t-shirt. It was a Got Head t-shirt with head on the back of the t-shirt. And then when we got home, I don't think my mum knew where to look or what to say. We didn't really understand the pun at the time. But yeah, that Got Head t-shirt, yeah, I think of that as well when I think of Al Snow.
Definitely. So number five for Michael, Al Snow. We were all in the same boat. So he's a mainstay in the hardcore title scene for most of '99, and like Hardcore Holly, he said would lean into the hardcore side of it more than some others would do. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
his five. At four, Michael's gone for probably someone that's going to be very close to the top, if not top of our lists. Crash Holly. So we've had Hard Holly. The 24/7 rule was instituted after Crash's first title win, and Crash would be a part of some of the funniest matches of that unique rule, including him losing the title by being pinned while sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Michael
it won't surprise you that Crash is on my list.
and mine.
22 reigns, only 88 days, but 22 reigns. I say only 88, that is pretty high compared to a lot, but it's
Yeah,
not up there with Steve Blackman and Big Boss Man with longest combined days. But yeah, I think Crash Holly really defined that era. Not just the hardcore stuff, but the comedy stuff, the stuff he did with the
yeah,
APA backstage.
yeah.
Um, just such a great time in my life personally when I think back and the memories of that period in my life, and wrestling was obviously a big part of it. And I don't think Crash Holly gets the flowers that he deserves. Um,
Let me know.
yeah. I'm glad that he's on Michael's list. I'm sure he's on yours as well, and he's
Yeah,
definitely on mine. But I'll let you know what number he's at when we get to him.
definitely. So who's your four?
My four's Al Snow, so we've already
Yep.
spoken. He was your five, Michael's five. So again, we were along the same thinking.
Yeah.
For the reasons that I said, I just think he was synonymous with that title.
Yeah, he certainly was. My four, and he has been mentioned already. Steve Blackman was my four. As you mentioned before, longest combined reign. The fact that he was a martial artist and done everything, I think, kind of helped that kind of made him a believable champion at the same time because of his background. And obviously, we've already mentioned about the weapons as well and the hardcore title. It's someone that's if you were in the attitude, if you were watching wrestling in the Attitude Era and you saw Steve Blackman and you knew they were creating this hardcore championship, you'd be like he'd be one of the front runners for it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It just worked. It just worked. As you
Mm,
say, you perhaps he's coming in as a serious kind of athlete and mixed martial artist, and there was an element, there's a big element of comedy in with the hardcore title as well. But it just absolutely they hit a home run with having Steve as part of that division, and as I say, longest the highest amount of days spent as the hardcore champion at 172.
yeah, indeed. And you'll be unsurprised to know Michael's number three, Steve Blackman, which was And he's basically gone on to talk about exactly the same as you did about 5 reigns over 172 days, and the fact that he beat Shane McMahon with that big elbow drop after Shane had fallen off the Titantron at SummerSlam 2000 for the reign. So I think we safely say Steve Blackman was definitely one of the best hardcore champions that we've got.
100%, mate. Couldn't agree more.
And you're free.
Three, Hardcore Holly. So I already spoke about him. I don't know if we mentioned his days, but he had 58 combined days, which was the same as The Undertaker. 6 reigns. Again, his whole name, his name was
Yep,
changed to Hardcore. So it
yep,
was it was only fitting that he had, 6 reigns and, he's in the top 8 in terms of combined amount of days as champion. Lots of matches with Al Snow in that period as
yeah,
well. I remember them having one-on-one matches for the hardcore title. A lot of the hardcore title top changes
mm,
were backstage and multi-man and
yeah,
different things. But like we mentioned earlier on in the pod, there was defined matches on the pay-per-views for the hardcore title, and Hardcore Holly versus Al Snow was definitely on one pay-per-view, if not multiple. So yeah, I think he's rightly on all of our lists.
yeah, definitely. So my three is definitely been one we've already spoken about, like a lot of these today, was Mick Foley.
Yeah,
Obviously, I put him up there because he was the first. I know you put him sort of lower because he was the first, and he only had that kind of that one-ish reign. Um, and I just think like everything about him at the time, he had multiple personas as well. Obviously he could have come out as Dude Love, could have come out as Cactus Jack later on down the line, and Mankind, of course. And I think someone that when you're looking at when they first introduced a championship and you needed to give it to someone to give it instant credibility, Mick Foley's that person at that particular time did give that championship that credibility at that moment at least anyway.
yeah, definitely, and they did it so well because I really need to go back and watch this time period back, from start to finish, the Attitude Era. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but Foley and Mankind specifically was positioned as one of the top stars. He was obviously world champion. So yeah, it's really impressive, really, um, that he's so synonymous. I know he was the first champion, but he just anything that he did was, must see, really. Yeah, he really set the title up for success by having him as the first champion. But yeah, he was involved in the main event scene as well
Yeah.
as the hardcore title scene, which for a lot of the hardcore title, it was kind of not necessarily the undercard or dark matches. It was on the shows, it was a big
Yeah.
part of the shows some weeks on Raw and on the pay-per-views. But there was a lot of like the mid card that was competing for the hardcore title. But yeah, a great feat really for the company having somebody that could be going for the world title one week, but he was involved with the hardcore title as well in the same period.
Yeah, he was really, really good for me. Right, the top two now. Michael's two, we've spoken about him. He was lower on my list. Was Rob Van Dam, and he was obviously the last hardcore champion because at the time, as you mentioned, they unified it with the Intercontinental Championship in 2002. But he did say that he went on to say that he not only, he had some great matches against Jeff Hardy, Chris Jericho, and The Undertaker as well back in the reign, and obviously before winning it at the final time. But yeah, I mean RVD was definitely a man that could just pretty much do it all within the WWE.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't know which way it was. I don't know which one Jeff and RVD was the hardcore champion. Which one was the Intercontinental at the time? I'd say
Have a
RVD.
look.
I don't. It could have been either way, but I remember that. And again, like we spoke earlier, just like mesh those styles of being a top in ring performer and with the hardcore element, the Van Daminator, Van Terminator with the trash cans. I think
Yeah,
he was the first person to do that. I know Shane McMahon did it as well. I think
yeah.
later on, he RVD is the first person I ever saw that do that. Um, what did they call it?
Coast to
Coast to
coast.
coast. Yeah, coast to coast and land on the trash can. Innovation in terms of moves that he did with weapons and mixing them with a move as well. So yeah, I'm not surprised that Michael rates him so highly. Um, Are you doing your number two? I've got number two that we haven't spoke about yet, which I'm excited to do. But do
Go
you
on
want to do
then. Go ahead.
your? So my number two is Raven,
Those
and
mine.
fantastic. We can have a discussion about him then. So I'm a huge Raven fan, always was. You know, he's runs in WCW, but he's an ECW and what he's done in the Independents, what he's done in TNA. But the hardcore title, he was a record 39-time hardcore champion.
Yep.
So he had like the match that we spoke about earlier at WrestleMania. But instantly when I think of the hardcore title, I think of Raven. I
Mm.
think of Raven, and I don't know how Raven would view his run in the WWF during that period because I perhaps saw him as more of a main eventer, or certainly had the potential to be that in
Mm.
WWF. So I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call it a waste because I think he did great things with a hardcore title. You know,
Yeah.
coming out with a trolley full of weapons is something that I think of when I think of Raven and I think of the hardcore title. I think out of all of them, there's one name obviously that I've got above him, but I think rightly so he's right at the very top of our list and my list as well as yours.
Yeah, I feel as if our number one's going to be the same as well. I've got this sneaking
Yeah.
suspicion. Raven for me, and you know, when you look at him and we followed his career from from ECW, WCW, WWE, I don't understand why no company understood him, if that makes sense. Because you've got somebody, I mean, ECW may have done, maybe understood him the most. He had not such a great mind for that bit, and he still does. Still does a great mind. I know he may have had I think he's got the early stages of Alzheimer's. I think he was saying, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
Anyway,
he's just had a documentary come out, I think, which I haven't seen yet. I think it's like an independent production.
yeah,
I
Code the
was getting
Raven.
around to watching it. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch it. I don't understand why he was never unless he rubbed people up the wrong way, which I don't know. We never know these things. Maybe a question for me to ask our controversial guest, whose name we're not going to mention, but I might ask that particular person why someone like a Raven was never thought of in a main event capacity when he kind of looked on the outside that he had all the tools, especially the
Yeah.
psychology aspect of it. I don't think there's many better than Raven.
That's certainly my perception as well. Like, again, when you look at his career, it was great. You know, he had a really good career, but I really think he could have been a top tier talent. And you know, we've saw him with different titles. We saw him as TNA champion in the early days of TNA. But yeah, in terms of the WWF, WWE, you know, in the early 2000s, I really thought that Raven could be a top star for them. And, you know, they obviously, I mean, he obviously had a lot of TV time,
Mm,
having 39 reigns, only 84 days. As much as his run in the hardcore division was fantastic, I think that could have been a springboard to doing more in the company. And
mm.
unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. But yeah, like you, I'm at a bit of a loss, and it's a bit of a mystery to me right now without the information as to why he wasn't a bigger star for the company.
Yeah, and I'm going to go to number one straight away to Michael's because Michael's number one, Raven. Funnily enough, it was his
Uh,
number one. He mentioned about the golf cart and how they come so close to knocking all the power out of the building because
yeah,
the tire was underneath one of the power cables, wasn't it? And he really enjoyed his matches with Al Snow and Crash Holly. So Michael's number one, Raven. I have a sneaking suspicion, David, that mine and your number ones are going to be the same. So I'm going to say the name first. You can follow. My number one is Crash Holly.
Crash Hollow, number one. Again, kind of alluded to it earlier as to some of the reasons why. Sadly, you know, his life was cut short
Yeah.
and he's no longer with us, but I definitely think that he should be a Hall of Fame contender, 100%, because he just defined an era and a division.
Yeah.
And he had, you know, we think of now as some of the great comedy wrestlers, and I think R-Truth springs to mind. But Crash Holly was doing some of that stuff, you know, way before. You know, he really was an innovator. I know that sounds like quite sure. He definitely was. I'd love to know how much input and involvement that Crash Holly had himself
Mm.
in some of these ideas and some of these cut scenes that we saw backstage with the APA and paying them off for the protection and losing the title while he was sleeping because he hadn't slept for weeks because of, everybody chasing him down for the hardcore title. Again, triggers a lot of nice, good memories for me. That period in my life, watching a lot of wrestling. And yeah, for me, although he's not statistically, he didn't have the most reigns, he didn't have the most combined days. He is my number one. When I think of this hardcore title, I think of Crash Holly and all of the great work that he did back then. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. I think when you say the word hardcore title, the first person you say is Crash Holly. There's no, I don't think anyone else would. I don't think there's maybe Raven. I think they may have come a close second, but I think when you name the what, when you say the name Hardcore Championship, those are the first two names that will always hit you. And he was just, it was just so funny every single week. You didn't know if he. I mean, I think he won and lost it a couple of times in the same night, which was
Yeah.
just it was just such fantastic. And sometimes when the Attitude Era, because sometimes the Attitude Era got serious with the stuff with Austin and McMahon, with DX, and they had that serious aspect to it, and something like that was going along. And sometimes you just needed to go. They'd take you on that roller coaster, right? And you needed to get there where that hardcore bit was, just to bring you down. You know, not say bring you down in a legitimate sense, but just take you on that journey. And that part of it was kind of the bit where the journey would start to climb back up towards whatever they were doing in the main event or that main segment of Raw, and just having it there and just seeing Crash Holly and you just wondering how or why, how he was going to get out alive in some cases with that championship. And I just love the fact that Crash was, and as you say, listen, the Hall of Fame got to be people that was innovative, and I don't think there was many more people as innovative as Crash Holly.
It was how much he cared about the title as it was his life, and some it was always funny, it was always entertaining. Like every time they did something, and you'd be sat watching Raw, and you'd kind of be waiting for that moment in the show or that segment in the show that was dedicated to the hardcore title. It was must see.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we sometimes watch Raw and SmackDown now, and you can skim through half an hour and nothing really happens, but you would have never taken the risk of missing the hardcore title bit because more often than not, it was some of the most entertaining stuff on the show. And yeah, like you think of the 24/7 title, I think of Drake Maverick, and I certainly
Yeah.
think of R-Truth.
Yeah.
But I think Crash Holly would have been a big inspiration for those guys when they look back to what he did with the hardcore title in the late 90s, early 2000s. It would have been the late 90s, I think.
Mm.
98, 99, 2000 maybe. But yeah, Crash Holly, absolute legend of the hardcore division. And hopefully, as you say, one day we'll see him in the Hall of Fame.
Definitely. So I would love to, like the nowadays, I would love to have seen him and do a skit with Danhausen.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just think it'd be great. He's tremendous. Crash Holly was someone that a bit as you say, a bit like R-Truth now. But someone that ultimately definitely would have deserved a spot in that Hall of Fame, and hopefully WWE don't ever forget the contributions that Crash Holly made during his career. But that was a fantastic top 10 list. We'll be back with a cruiserweight edition of the top 10 coming soon. So we're going to have, the Cruiserweight Championship synonymous with WCW and the WWE. So if you want to get your list in on that, please do. Please drop us a line. We'd love to hear your lists as well as ours. And you can follow us at HTT Buckle everywhere. We'll be back with This Week in Wrestling, review shows, interviews, everything, you name it. We'll be here with it. But David, thank you as ever. You don't get to sign off today. You have to wait for Sundays for your signature sign off. But for David Robinson, I've been your host, Adam Cousins. You've been watching the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. And until next time, everybody, buckle down, stay safe. Goodbye.